Welcome to Booked and Branded. I am here today with Patrick O'Connell. Patrick is an entrepreneur, product designer, and business mentor. Over his career, he's delivered more than $5 million worth of industrial design projects. He's also the founder of Profitable Designer. Can I say it right?
Yep.
Where he's personally worked with over 600 designers across 15 different niches, helping 170 plus students hit 6 figures and 17 scale all the way to 7 figures. I'm lucky enough to be part of his Profitable Designer program, and even luckier to have him here on the podcast to chat about business growth, mindset, and scaling as a creative. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me. Oh yeah, super excited to meet you in person and chat business.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate the time you're taking. So, Patrick, for those who might not be super familiar with your journey, can you just give us a 10,000-foot view on how you transitioned from 9-to-5 designer to building a multi-million-dollar design business and mentoring hundreds of creatives?
I think it just started with working a 9-to-5 job. I was super passionate about being a designer. Went to college. Very quickly worked at a couple of businesses where I'd build a few products that help the businesses like really expand internationally, and thought that I was worth more than a 9-to-5 salary. I think I was making like $75,000 a year back in 2011, and I thought I was worth more than that because I helped literally 2 companies break into overseas markets, and it was that disconnection, I suppose, between what I thought I was worth and what I was getting paid. It just forced my brain to try to fill in the gap, basically. So I started, trying to build my own businesses. I tried a snack company. I obviously worked on the weekends on my own things, failed like 5 or 6 times with, 5 or 6 different ventures. And then tried to grow a design business whilst I was working full time. Ran into the issues that most designers run into, which is, why the hell should I pick you? And design's just a cost. Show me how it's a return on investment and how I get my money back. And then kind of got a bit discouraged after a while. And I had a couple of mates that were originally from my hometown in Albury that did a $3 million launch back in 2011, I think, who I caught up with, and it completely expanded my understanding of what was possible. And I invested a bit of money with them to learn the marketing and sales things that they'd learnt, and was going to move in that direction because I thought there was more money in marketing and sales, and then realized everything I was learning. I was like, man, nobody in the design space is doing any of this. So I ditched the portfolio. I built what's called a video sales letter. I started reaching out to people on LinkedIn using the templates I was given. Within the first month of doing that and running a few Google ads, did $30K a month. And then 2 months later did $50,000, and then quit my 9-to-5 job, and went full time, got too busy. And in the process of trying to find staff to work with me, I had people offer to pay me to teach them basically how I got so busy. And that's kind of what started the genesis of Profitable Designer. And, 5 or 6 years later, here we are. Like, still got the design business. We predominantly help people in China, and like manufacturers bring products into the Western markets. And yeah, in the process, we've just worked with designers from, I think, maybe 15 countries, and maybe 12 design disciplines. So yeah, it's been super fun. Yeah.
It's such an inspiring story. Started from the bottom, now we're here.
Yeah. It never feels like that. You kind of you're just staying curious on what grabs your attention in the moment, multiplied by a lot of time. It sounds crazy, like to think about it, but when you look back, it never felt crazy because you're just focusing on one problem at a time, I suppose, and learning to become open and aware of what's happening around you, like we were discussing before, and going, man, there's something there. Why do I keep getting people wanting to have a conversation about this? What does that infer about what's missing in the market from a product or a service standpoint, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just off the back of that, speaking about conversation, you've kind of mentioned to us the importance of asking the right questions and having the conversation that the market wants to have. How can designers and creative entrepreneurs better tune into what their clients actually need and sort of start hitting the conversation that's happening in their minds?
Yeah, so it obviously I bring this up a lot in the training program, and everything's derived from a quote that Dan Kennedy brought up. Dan Kennedy's this like really chauvinistic, funny mustache and like 80s porn star glasses from like the 80s, and he sold information products and was basically responsible for direct response marketing. He had a quote that says, "You always want to enter the conversation that's already happening in the consumer's mind."
Yeah.
Right. And that it's nearly the most profound thing I've heard in marketing. And the way to do that as anybody, it's not just a designer, it's if you're a mechanic, if you're selling something, your job is to remove the ego, because the ego is the thing that gets in the way. So what happens is a designer looks at an opportunity and they go, I'm a designer, I sell design services in my design business. How do I sell that person design? Whereas an entrepreneur and what I believe an entrepreneur is just somebody that looks at life through a very objective lens based on first principles. That's what I think they are. The opposite of doing what a designer does in that situation with the ego is looking and going, well, why is that person saying this? And like trying to figure out what the actual root cause of the problem is. And like, why do you think, in that example, why do you think a website's important? What are you trying to move towards? Where are you trying to go? What do you know about it? What have you experienced, and how do you define success? And what you find is that there's very few problems that are just purely design related when you're willing to open up and actually think about it laterally. So yeah, my best advice to everybody is your job. And I was just telling you, we interviewed, 7 of our 7-figure students over the last couple of weeks. Every single one of them used the term listening. Wow. in when I asked the question, what do you know that most people don't? And it was always something around the idea of listening, which to me is just objective listening, trying to figure out what the root problem is, and then working back from first principles to figure out what the offer is. And yeah, design will play a major role in that, but it's not going to be all of it. It's the same way that like a coffee is technically 95% milk, right? But it's what's not milk that makes the coffee valuable, if that makes sense. That's how to think about it.
That's so profound, just listening, like how your 7-figure entrepreneur students have said, you just need to actually just listen. It's like as simple and as complicated as that.
Yeah, the other thing is that they're all really, there's nothing, they're just very humble, practical and simple people. Like there's nothing, it's you, like if I was to like go back 10 years and be like, oh, well, what do I think speaking to 7 design millionaires would sound like? It's nothing like what I would expect.
Really?
No, they're just regular people. Cam, the guy I spoke to yesterday, has 8 kids.
Wow.
Works like 25 hours a week. And he's just a really, really practical guy who focuses on doing the right things. And there's nothing flashy about him. He's got a few awards, which is, he's a way better designer than I am by a mile. But there's nothing typical design industry success about any of these people. They just go under the radar and make a lot of money and produce a lot of market value.
Said before that many designers own businesses where the math is fundamentally broken. So could you break down what that means and also how designers and other creatives could potentially fix that?
Yeah. So it's a really boring topic that I'll try to make like more sexy and exciting, but there's a reason when people go under the Shark Tank and they deliver their product idea. There's a reason that the first questions that the sharks ask is always, how much do you sell these for? What do they cost to produce? What does it cost you to acquire a customer using ads? What's your wholesale, retail? What are your markup percentages? All of the questions are basically, they're trying to fill in the spreadsheet of the profit and loss statement and what the number health is of the business. Because ultimately the product doesn't matter if it doesn't produce economics that are desirable. So the best investors on the planet, they don't care about the product. They care about the economics that it produces. And what most designers don't understand is it doesn't matter how good you are as a designer. And maybe it's easier to kind of reframe this. Let's just imagine we sell little coffee tables like this, right? It doesn't matter how good the coffee table is, or if you're the most talented, award-winning coffee table producer on the planet.
Yeah.
If this costs you $100 to sell, and if you can sell it for $100 and it costs you $80 to produce, you're so fucked. It's not funny. Like you can't win, right? Because you have to be able to ship this to the customer and keep money. And the issue is that you can't afford to spend any effort or time to actually promote it because it's not baked into the margins.
Right.
So basically, I can speak to somebody and anybody that's ever been an investor or that's grown a successful business of any type, they can literally hear 5 or 6 metrics and they can tell you whether that business is going to win or not. So I can ask 5 questions. I can ask, what's your average project value? What's your average cost to deliver? What's your baked in marketing margin? What's your profit margin? And like, how many people do you guys need to speak to in order to generate that average project value? That's all I need. I can tell whether that business is going to work or not. So like a good example of this, if we come back to this this coffee table, if you're competing against somebody that's selling it for $100 and it costs them $80, then and they keep $20, but 10 of that goes to shipping, so they're making $10 per coffee table. The business that can make it for $100, that can make it for $50 and sell it for $100, right? Pays the same $10 shipping, now has 4 times the profit margin. Right. They could invest half of that profit margin into the marketing efforts to sell more of them. And the way that you want to think about it is the greater the profit margin in the actual, total sale minus the cost to deliver, the exponentially more likely the business is to win, because it's actually got the resources to hire people, product development, improve what people are buying, but most importantly, get in front of more people because they can afford to do it, whether it's hiring somebody to do manual outreach or run ads, and you can pay sales teams to actually track down the leads and maintain relationships with them. So really what I believe is the best way to think about things is you have to become a CEO of your own business, which means that most of your time has to be spent asking, how do we get in front of better opportunities with more purchasing power, which means higher paying people? How do we give them better offers so that our average project value can be higher? How do we relentlessly try to work down how long it takes to deliver stuff so that we're increasing the gap between what it costs us to deliver and what we can sell it for? And if we're continually doing that, then we're going to be able to afford to bring people onto the team, replace ourselves with other people, and most importantly, run ads, scale the marketing, whatever you want. But then fourth, how do I remove everything that isn't just focusing on 1, 2, and 3? And the major reason design businesses don't move in the right direction is, firstly, they don't get that the whole game is economics. What you sell doesn't matter if the math behind it is bad. And then they're not spending all of their time trying to manipulate their own business economics.
That was such a light bulb moment for me in the training program, just a way I just never thought about it before, because it, like, you're so right. It's all down to economics. And yeah, like what you were saying, there was this analogy that you gave that was so great, that why are all cities on a coast, like the shipping routes.
That's so I was telling that just the other day, I think. But like everything happens because of economics.
Yes.
Right? So it's economics is basically the science of why things occur.
Yes.
So like perfect example is we'll sit in this podcast until it gets uncomfortable or one of us has to go to the bathroom. And the benefit and value of doing that thing outweighs the cost of disrupting the podcast. You know what I mean? Well, the reason that, 85% of the world's population lives 200 miles from a coastline is because of economics. It's the technology that moved things from A to B was ships and over water. Therefore, everybody moved closer to the docks because economically it made more sense to live there than in Alice Springs back in Alice, like 1810, if that makes sense. So it's understanding that if you break things down into their trade-offs, you can actually determine what's going to happen. So you'll hear people say, if you want to figure out what's going to happen, what's the incentivization structure? So if you look at a business and you see that their average project value's $20,000 and it costs the team $20,000 worth of the team's effort and salary to deliver it, you're in a lot of trouble. So a lot of what I'm trying to do is re-engineer my business economics so that I compete in a space that most people aren't even aware of.
Right.
And that's what allows you to just eat people's lunch, basically.
I love that so much. It ties into another idea that you teach around standing out in the market that I love. So you said before that controversy must be at the nexus of your marketing strategy. So how can designers incorporate that approach into their content strategies to stand out online and attract the right clients?
There is a few ways, like controversy's one of them. I suppose if you think about, like if we bring it back to first principles, people only buy stuff that they've spent time considering.
Right.
And you can only consider something if you're aware of it. Yeah. Right? And the only way that you can become aware of something is if it disrupts your patterns of what you're experiencing.
Yes.
So like if somebody walked across here like on the street and they were on fire, it would interrupt a pattern because it's not something we usually see. Well, that's all our feeds, our social scrolls are, and everything that we witness is people trying to pattern interrupt and put something in front of us we haven't seen before, right? Because we're fundamentally engineered to only notice differences in our environment. So you and I will sit here and we'll continue to chat until a big crack appears over here, and then we're both like, what the hell? Because it's interfered with our environment, right? And I think, like, my guess is back when we were monkeys, like hundreds of thousands of years ago, that's what protected us from threats, right? If there's a rustling in the bushes, then notice it was the ancestors that noticed the rustle and saw that it was a threat were the ones that survived, and the ones that didn't see the difference basically got made redundant. So the key for everything is to create contrast.
Right.
Marketing is just about creating contrast. And contrast is the mechanism that allows attention.
Right.
So what I believe the best thing to do is the easiest way to produce attention that's valuable in the marketplace is to actually go do something that nobody else has done before.
Yes.
So go get a result for the market that nobody else can even fathom. Because in doing so, you will actually learn what's wrong about conventional logic when it comes to moving towards that thing. So what I've learned personally through my journey of grow my own design business is that a lot of what's told in the design spaces, it's actually incorrect, right? And a lot of my marketing content is just, here's why this idea sucks and why I believe it's so based on my own experience. And so you can create really controversial content because it's counterintuitive to what the market has been told.
Yes.
And the really powerful kicker about that is you're saying something now that's controversial that most people disagree with, which polarizes the market, but then you can justify with logic why you think that way. So it demonstrates that you know something the market doesn't know, and it automatically puts you at the top of the thought leadership pile, right? So it's a beautiful kind of 1-2 punch. But the problem most people have is that they don't deliver the market anything that's worth a damn. So they've got nothing to talk about that's actually generating attention and actually justifying why they're a thought leader. So basically, if you look at most designers or most people's content strategy, it's what are other people saying and how do I basically mirror what they're saying and just hope that my portfolio is better. Basically, the way that I believe it should be done is, this is where I think all of my competitors get it wrong based on the fact that I get better results. And this is why I think I get better results. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And it's just rooted in insight and value. So controversy just happens to be my most enjoyable way to do it because I like, causing a bit of drama and stirring. And the key is to produce polarizing content because you don't get people loving you unless there's just as many people that think you're a douche. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas there's a lot of people are producing content and they don't want to be judged, so they never say anything that they actually truly believe. And then what happens is everybody's like, yeah, he's kind of correct. But that's not where money exists. Money exists in, man, this person's completely opened me up to a new way of thinking. But that also comes with the byproduct of this guy's full of shit and he's a scam. You know what I mean? You can't have one without the other. So if you think about everybody that's really successful in social media, they have just as many haters as they have loyal followers.
Sure.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Like, how many people hate Joe Rogan? Lots.
Yeah.
Why? Because so many people love him. It's not, and anybody that's kind of just meh, like think about news reporters. Nobody loves news reporters or hates them.
Yeah.
But they don't have a cult following.
Right.
Because they're just in the middle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So controversy's like just it's a really powerful tool if you can get your market results that nobody else can deliver, then it's probably the strongest thing you've got content-wise.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful in combination with the right offer, the right conversation, and just using it as a tool to sort of like get eyeballs on and having the kind of conversations that you want to be having. Another concept that you teach that really stuck with me is the sandwich versus the flower analogy.
Yeah.
I just love it so much. So you've used that analogy that the clients want the sandwich, not necessarily the flower. This is something I'm working on in my own design business right now. So could you elaborate on this and explain how it applies to how designers should present their services and also build offers for the market?
Yeah. So what I'm talking about when I talk about the relationship between flour and like a chicken salad sandwich is that if we bring everything back to first principles, who makes the most money in the world? And if we look at like all of the biggest companies on the planet, none of them sell raw ingredients. So there's no like supplier of wheat in the S&P 500, like no water bottling companies. It's always companies that sell stuff that's mushed together in a real meaningful combination. So like my laptop, for example, it's a combination of things. And the combination and the ratio based on the taste creates the value and, gets us to spend, $5,500 on something that basically costs $500 to put together. Right. So designers fundamentally are like in the supermarket, they're selling wheat or flour. Let's say flour.
Yeah.
Okay. Flour's way better than wheat. Wheat's even worse than flour. Because like think about it. You got to grind it. You got to grind it. Well, they don't sell wheat in the supermarket anyway, but most designers are selling an incredible organic flour. The problem with that flour is the only people that purchase it are the 90-year-old Italian grandmothers that know how to do something with it, right? And for every 90-year-old Italian grandmother, there's a 25-year-old boy who's never cooked a day in his life that is going to grab a grab-and-go sandwich off the shelf and basically pay 50 times what the grandma's paying for the raw ingredient of the flour, just because it's in a different form, but most importantly, because it solves a problem. So it's understanding that we can manipulate raw ingredients by just adding a few additional steps to create something that's got a completely different value structure where people are willing to swap for the value of getting their hunger suppressed in the moment, if that makes sense. So what I believe is so powerful about the analogy is that you understand that it's not enough to have a good raw ingredient.
Yeah.
What the most profitable way to sell your expertise is to figure out what to combine it with and who to give it to that allows them to unlock something that's so far away from what they're currently experiencing that it's actually quite an outcome. And then you do two things in that situation. The first is you're no longer sitting next to 17 other vendors of flour trying to sell your flour, which unfortunately you'll have to compete on price because that's the only way to compete.
Sure.
You now are able to sell something that nobody else is selling. And because of that, people have to make a decision based on value instead of price because you're the only option.
Sure.
So my daughter tripped over. Well, I was driving a remote control car and she drove over the remote control car on a skateboard and we busted open her chin. I had to take her to emergency. That they could charge what they want because they've got a monopoly on the solution. Right? They're the only people that could have helped us at 3:00 in the morning. Therefore, the pricing structure is relative to their monopoly and the fact that they're the only body that could solve the problem. And the value of the problem severely outweighed the cost still, and that's why we had to pay $5,500 for the stitches. Right? It was in between week that I let the insurance go. So it was a costly move. But when you can manipulate the raw ingredients to make meaningful combinations that build things that allow you to solve problems other people can't solve, you create pricing monopolies. So it's continually just trying to ask, what can I do here that other people aren't doing that's going to radically help my customers move to a better outcome? And then once you've got that answer, that also becomes your marketing strategy. You just talk about what you're doing that other people aren't.
Shall we finish off with a quick fire Q&A?
Yeah, let's do it.
Ready for it? Okay.
Yeah.
So one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self?
Trust my intuition way more. Yeah. Like, and I feel like everybody's kind of discovering this as well, but just listen to your own gut instinct and act upon it. It's way smarter than we give credit for. And I think I've spent a lot on coaching and mentoring and trainings and masterminds. And a lot of what I'm learning is just the confirmation that I was right with my gut instincts.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I just kind of needed to hear it one more time. So just trusting myself more, definitely.
That's a fire one.
Yeah.
Your favorite business book?
My favorite business book, I've got two. Work the System by Sam Carpenter, which is probably the most boring audiobook ever produced. But teaches everybody basically how to build systems and how to think with a systems mindset. And then entrepreneurial book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, which basically it's a derivative of what we were talking about before between selling flour and selling a sandwich. And the book's called 0 to 1.
0 to 1.
Yeah. It's not even, it's such a valuable book that he was just delivering it, I think, at Princeton University, and one of the students was like, this would be an incredible book. Do you mind if I transcribe your notes?
Wow.
And we turned it into a book. That's how valuable somebody thought it was, that they basically just turned his lectures into a New York Times bestseller.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that. And we're talking about economics. Like, he wasn't even trying to produce this book.
Right.
But it was, the content was so good that it became a book, without him, of course he had to like polish it off, but the idea wasn't his. So like we were talking before, like there's clues, there's magical clues sitting everywhere. You just got to be able to read them, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Read the clues and listen.
Yeah.
A favorite business or mindset quote that lives rent-free in your mind, if you have one?
Yeah. I like the one, you can't outwork your problems, you have to outthink them.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm massive on that. That's my whole, like, the DNA of what I'm trying to do for myself is just live to that mantra.
Yeah.
So it's not about working hard, it's about making the right move at the right time and making sure that that's the right move, if that makes sense.
And on that note, thank you so much for coming in, Patrick. You're absolutely good.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Where can people find you if they want to learn more?
My design website is patrickoconnell.com.au and then profitabledesigner.com. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Patrick.
Pleasure. Awesome.